Hello, hello. Welcome to the Outsmart Overeating podcast. I'm Leslie Hooper, and alongside me is co-coach Steph Miramontes. Steph, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about, you know what to do, so why the hell aren't you doing it? And I know I'm speaking from experience that this was by far one of my biggest frustrations when I was circling that diet drain, bouncing up and down the scale, not making any meaningful progress. But before we dive into today's topic, I just want to make a brief announcement that we are going to be opening the doors to the signature psychology-based weight loss program, Unstuffed. We only do this twice a year. So put it on your calendars, y'all. Monday, April 22nd is when we will be accepting new clients into the program. And to be clear, there is no obligation for joining the interest list, but you are going to get access to early action bonuses. I love to reward people who are decisive and are ready to take action and don't sit on the sidelines of their life. And I think that's a wonderful way to demonstrate that and send a message to your higher self that you're committed to doing something different. And so again, the interest list is the place you want to register for that early notification. You can do so in the show notes. Okay, Steph, are you ready? We're going to go ahead and dive in. I just want to say right out the gate today, it's really not my goal to dump a bunch of information on our listeners. The reality is we're dealing with professional dieters on this podcast. If you are here, there's a good chance that you've been dieting for a minimum 5, 10, 15 years, and you already know all the things, right? And if you don't, okay, go to my Instagram, your Instagram stuff, go to the website, go download the ebooks. We put out a ton of free content. There's a weekly newsletter, right? So you can definitely get the information you need between all those free resources, but that's really not the problem for our listeners. And as professional dieters, I'm willing to bet that you all have kind of one thing in common, and it's the inability to lose weight and keep it off long term. Chances are you're probably frustrated, but it's not because you're lacking that information, right? It's the inability to implement. It's the real problem is the implementation. So I think for me, one of the most maddening things about my own experience was knowing that I should be doing something and not being able to do it. And I didn't really understand why. So, stuff sound familiar?
Definitely sounds familiar. It's like I know all the things. In fact, that's why most people that are in the fitness industry get into the fitness industry, because we believe that there is some mysterious thing out there, some piece of information we are missing for our own journey to come together, for the pieces to come together. So we think more books, more education, passing more tests, let me just work out differently. Let me try this different program. Let me learn a little more about supplements or nutrition or whatever it is. It's like, maybe it's the creatine, like whatever. And no shade on creatine. I actually take creatine, but like, we just think that there's got to be something out there for us that we're not knowing. And then eventually we just realize it's the same information recycled over and over again. And it's maybe not an information problem. Maybe we knew it all along and there's an implementation issue, some kind of barrier, some mysterious force stopping us from taking good care of ourselves.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I mean, listen, I would take the time to install the app on my phone, calculate my macros, go grocery shopping to ensure I had all of the right foods available, map out the perfect workout program that week, follow the plan on Monday and Tuesday to perfection. And by Wednesday evening, the wheels start to fall off. And I'm already struggling to stick to the plan. And it starts small, just by sneaking a few fries off of Sydney's plate when she was young. And that would spiral into a case of the fuckets. And next thing you know, I'm elbows deep in a box of Cheez-Its in front of the TV. And, you know, clearly I know what I'm talking about here. I'm speaking from experience. So it didn't matter how much information I had. I had the detailed plan all the way to my goal, but I really sucked at following through. And it wasn't because I didn't want it bad enough, which is one thing that I know you feel the same way, Steph, just cannot stand it when the diet industry or people in the fitness industry tell you if you wanted it bad enough, you would just, you need more self-discipline, you need more willpower. We just need to grin and bear it kind of thing. And I think this really gets to what today's episode is about is, why aren't we doing the things that we say are important to us? And so last week we spent time talking about the how-tos with the habits. Today, I just want to talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about the why, not the how. Steph, I'd love to hear some of your insights as it relates to some of the bigger mistakes. I mean, why do you think that we are on this hamster wheel, seemingly incapable of getting off?
It's probably because we're not doing our plans in glitter pens. That's the missing element, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. I never used a glitter pen, so you might be onto something there.
No, I think the biggest issue here is that we're just really not taught to understand what drives us to make the choices that we're making. We're not taught to stop and pause and look at how we're feeling or how we want to feel and the role that snacking, picking, overeating is actually playing in our lives. We make it mean something about us, something's wrong with us, but we're not stepping back and examining, where did this start in the first place? Why do I even have this habit? Why does someone else not develop this habit and I did? What is kind of running beneath the surface here? Because you can count calories all day long. You can watch that number just shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, or your macros or your points or whatever it is. You can Whole30 as much as you want to, but there is always going to be that part of you that, unless you develop the emotional fluency and skill set to address your needs without food, there's always going to be that risk, that fear, that worry that the dam is going to break. And as soon as you start, you can't stop. Momentum is in place. The wheels come off, as you often say, and now we're finding ourselves emotionally eating, overeating in the land of the fuckets, even maybe binge eating, and making devastated promises to ourselves that we are going to get this together tomorrow or Monday. And it just sucks. It feels so bad and so defeating. It's hard, but it really does come down to your emotional language, your ability to see what is actually going on and learn how to meet those needs in a new way.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, as I've been harping on during the launch of this podcast, is we spend so much time focusing on the external factors that we don't really have we don't have the knowledge, the skill set, or the understanding of how our thoughts ultimately influence our feelings and then our actions. They don't teach you that in school. And so what I'd like today's episode to be about is being the detective of your own mind and body and helping our listeners understand how to observe thoughts and notice the way that they feel. And I know emotions, gross, right? Yucky, who wants to deal with that? But there is value in what, or understanding the language of feelings, right? Because it's important to know that every decision that we're making in this life is based on a feeling that we want to experience. So, as I often say, the color of toothbrush you own, the outfit you're wearing today, the neighborhood you chose to live in, the car you drive, the job you work in, the friends right? Like whether you've chosen to be in a monogamous relationship, have children, I mean, get a pet, all of these decisions we've made because we wanted to feel a certain way. And this message is important because it will help you understand why your brain tells you to eat when your body doesn't need more food. And when I kind of reflect on my own experience, I didn't really understand it at the time in a way that I do now. But for me, there was a lot of fear and a lot of self-talk that was totally subconscious. My inner critic was a real asshole, and I believed every single word. And so, of course, I'm just going through life through this, automated narrative beneath the surface, making all of these decisions based off of what I felt now was just such a false, unhelpful narrative. And it sounded a lot like, you're never going to figure this out. What's wrong with you? You're a failure. If you really wanted this, you would try harder. And, all of these thoughts were just subconscious. I didn't recognize or identify how they actually contributed to my actions. And so I do think that there was an element of fear of failure and also fear of success. And this is something that I talk about more in depth in the email newsletter. So for those of you that haven't subscribed yet, I would encourage you to do so in the show notes. But one thing that I was talking with a client about last week was how, as humans, we really do just have kind of like these three primary emotions: love, pain, and fear. And every feeling we experience is rooted in one of those emotions. And that just became so much easier for me to start to kind of understand my emotional language a bit more. And recently, as I was having this conversation with a client who was struggling to implement aspects of the program, she was, not really being consistent with her habits. And mind you, this is a client who wants to change, right? She's paying for a coach to hold her accountable. It's my job to ensure that she's successful, and yet she's still quitting on herself over and over and over again. And I just poked at her a bit. I was just probing, and I asked her, do you really want to change? Because sometimes we like the idea of it, but there's work involved when it comes to change. And I asked her about that, and she said, I think deep down, I don't actually believe that I can do this. That one thought, that one belief, right, changes everything. Because if that's what we really believe at our core, then we are going to act in accordance with that belief. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Steph, I'm sure you've seen this many a time with your own clients, and how the thoughts kind of create that cycle of self-sabotage that they may not even really be truly aware of.
I mean, with almost every single client I've ever coached ever, you know, with myself too. If you deep down don't believe that you can change permanently, that there is a version of you out there in the future that knows how to come home after a long day of work and not pour yourself a glass of wine and proceed to eat a bag of potato chips in front of the television and sabotage while promising that tomorrow's going to be better. If you don't see that version of you, and gosh, it's hard to do when you've been repeating these patterns, then on a day that you do come home stressed from work, the desire to fulfill the old habit, the self-soothing, the comforting, is going to be so much stronger than your belief in a future that you actually do want, that you actually are willing to work for, and you have been working for. On a good day, hell yeah, we got this, we can do it. But on a bad day, your beliefs really start to shine through, because they are the ones who, these beliefs are the ones who are rising to the surface, and it's what you're operating from. So you can say whatever you want to say, but our beliefs are where we operate from, especially when emotions are not being taken care of, when they're heightened, when they're needing to get some relief. So I also have a similar story. I had a client that kept doing the same old shit. And it's like, hey, you are working so hard. I know you want this. So like, do you think that you can? change? Like, do you see a different version of you? And, deep down, it was just like, I have failed so many times. If I lose weight and somebody sees, somebody notices, then they're going to be watching, they're going to be paying attention. I don't want to hear the compliments. I don't want anybody to notice that I've lost weight. I don't want anybody to congratulate me. I don't want any of that, because then it's going to hurt so much worse when I gain it back. And it's like, well, no fucking wonder that you aren't willing to do the emotional work to overcome these difficult feelings, when deep down you think that the shoe is going to drop and it's all going to be taken away from you. That is so painful.
Absolutely. And it's just our way of protecting ourselves, right? But I think the reality is when we think we can't, we don't. And in my client's case, once she revealed this to me, and I'm with you, the vast majority of our clients come into our program very skeptical. They've tried everything. This is their last Hail Mary attempt, and I get it. But when they start to see their little wins stack up, the belief gets more cemented. And I think in the beginning, they do really lean on us for that belief, right? They're like, well, they borrow our belief because they are like, well, okay, I'm just going to trust that if somebody else in my similar circumstance was successful, had my same obstacles, then I can probably figure this out too. I mean, the reality is every problem is figure outable, as they say. And so with my particular client, I just adjusted the program to better meet her psychological needs. So instead of focusing as much on the habits, we went a little heavy on the beliefs and working through that first and foremost, because that was her biggest barrier. The primary goal wasn't now to just execute the habits. Sure, that was going to happen in the background to the best of our ability, but it really is a better use of our time together to create a plan that helps her develop the tools to believe in herself. And that is a skill that can be learned. So without that, she would have continued spinning her wheels, feeling more disheartened one week after the next, more frustrated than before. But by simply giving her a few small daily tasks that she was able to do consistently, then she, of course, feels more accomplished. She feels more confident in her skill set. And over time, that belief starts to get bigger and grow. And so did her ability to execute the behaviors. And so this is where I think just trying harder, or I got to get back on track on Monday over and over and over again, it's that false promise. That's your clue that something isn't quite right in our thought process. If we're having to constantly get back on track, there's a flaw in your plan somewhere. And I think it's a good opportunity to get curious about even that rhetoric is so unhelpful, right? Like, because to me, when I hear get back on track, and I'm getting a little off track here myself right now, but it signals to me right out the gate that I'm dealing with somebody who has unrealistic expectations, unrealistic standards of what is required of them to be successful. It's a perfectionist mindset. It's all or nothing way of thinking. Someone who thinks that they are an expert instead of a student and is taking on that identity. And I think when you're new at something or you haven't figured something out yet, then there should be a lot of room for error. What do you think, Steph?
Well, when I hear somebody say, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it, and that narrative comes with a variety of, I should count my calories. I should, even within the boundaries of our program, I should do the habits more perfectly. I need to make every meal a 5. I need dinners all to be a 5, or, something along those lines. I'm like, okay, so you think you know what to do, but you're just not doing it, but you really don't know what to do, because you think you need to do more. You need to try harder. And while the habits do need to be in place, or whatever system you're using to find success, that does need to be in place. That's not what's missing. What's missing is the figuring out, the detective work, the journaling, the uncovering, the sitting with the emotional experience instead of trying to distract from it. It's like, okay, well, if I want to end my dinner at 5, then immediately after dinner, I need to go for a walk. And it's like, that's nice. It's a very healthy habit. It's lovely, but you're just avoiding. Like, all we're doing is avoiding the reasons why we don't eat to satisfied in the first place. And if we're not going to be willing to learn that, then on a good day, you will eat to a 5 and go for a walk. And on a not so good day, you will not want to go on a walk, and you are not going to want to do the things that distract you because they are higher effort than sitting around and eating and eating and eating, or snacking or grazing or going mindless or drinking or whatever it is. And you're not going to break that habit because we're not connecting. We're not having the conversation. So when people say, I know what to do, but I'm just not doing it, I'm like, tell me what you think you need to be doing. And it's always a doing thing instead of a feeling thing. You don't need to do more, you need to feel more.
Great insight. As I always say, where the mind goes, the body will follow. I'm always telling our clients, your mental transformation is going to happen before the physical. And, the funny thing is when you think about something you want to accomplish, like joining this program, for example, and even when I signed up to work with my coach, it's so funny because I could just literally see what my brain was doing. It was like bird's eye view, right? I'm about to make this big financial investment, and I was even on a wait list anticipating it. And then when the doors finally opened and the opportunity to join is presented there, my brain immediately throws up 100 reasons why right now isn't the right time, or I shouldn't do it, or I can't do it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just so typical of what a brain does. I'm about to make a change, and it immediately tells me all the reasons why I can't. And it's just a way of protecting ourselves, right? There's risk there. And a brain has one job to keep, well, two, I guess, keep me feeling safe, comfortable, secure, right? It just wants me to be warm and cozy. And that means not stepping outside of the comfort zone ever. But there've never been any success in my life by just inaction, doing nothing. That's the only thing that's guaranteed failure in my life. So I think when it comes to, I guess, being the kind of person who follows through, it is rooted in fear more often than not, but everybody encounters fear. It's uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. And when clients say that, it's just hard, and I'm like, well, it's not hard. It's just different. You're used to things being a certain way. And I think changing the word from hard to different can be helpful, because if we're just sitting around kind of talking about how hard it is, from my perspective, now we're kind of adopting a little bit of a, I don't know if victim mentality is the right word, but just more of a kind of like hopeless or defeated perspective. And being uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean you're in danger. Good things come out of being uncomfortable. So I think fear indicates that what we should be working in oftentimes. And I think the smaller steps we take right out the gate, making it so easy, right? Going for a 5-minute walk if you have a goal of being more active, or going to bed 10 minutes earlier, things of that nature. When you conquer it, celebrate it, pat yourself on the back and stuff. That's one of the things that we teach our clients in Unstuffed, is the value of celebrating a daily win, because we're so hyper-focused on what's going wrong that we completely miss what's going right. If a client is eating 21 meals in a week and I get on the phone with them, the first thing they want to talk about is the 2 meals where things didn't go according to plan. I'm like, what about the 19 that did? Like, did you take a moment to appreciate how far you've come? Right? And so I think that there's a lot of value in identifying what's going well, and really recognizing that your fear is mostly just a bullshit story in your head. When your brain is trying to talk you out of doing something, or telling you that you're not good enough, or that's your opportunity to confront it, and just prove it wrong. Take the next small step. I think the only way out or to the other side is through. So anything you want to add here, Steph?
I think that this is one of those topics that gets more clear with practice and time. It's something you really have to be in and experience in order to see the benefits of it. So if this feels a bit like a foreign language to you, then just stick around and keep listening. The pieces will start to come together, and before you know it, you'll be blowing your own mind. You will really start observing where your barriers are, and everything that used to be all about the food, you will realize has very little to nothing to do with the food, because you're going to learn what is the sort of catalyst for your behavior, whether it's your environment or your emotional state or both, oftentimes both, that keep you stuck in these same patterns. But I will just say that it's not hopeless. It's pretty amazing what can change and what can happen when you start to develop this emotional language, when you start to be present and observe and stop judging the feelings that you have as bad or wrong, or feel like you have to run to safety immediately, when you can start to self-soothe and change your experience, then the food starts to lose its power. Sure, the brain might still suggest that you get up and get a snack every time you're uncomfortable or want to procrastinate or you're bored or overwhelmed, or whatever emotional experience you're having, but it becomes a mental suggestion instead of a demand. And I think that's where things really start to come together for people, is like, oh, this is optional. I don't actually have to operate from this thought. I could just work on whatever I need instead. I can address those needs in a different way, in a way that feels healthy and in a way that makes me feel proud of myself, like I'm growing. So, but it's part of the human experience. We all go through it. It's just that our tendency, for those of you who are in our programs, for those of you listening to the podcast, for us, is to solve all of this with food. Other people use other strategies and mechanisms and things like that, but so it just becomes so obvious when you start to take a step back and learn about this stuff.
Right. If you're new to the message and to our content, this might be one of those episodes that kind of goes over your head, because frankly, I remember the first time I read Janine Roth's book, Women, Food, and God, and I was like, what the hell is she talking about? I mean, like, there were certain ideas and concepts that made sense, but a lot of it I just wasn't ready for. And it's like, as the saying goes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And we see it all the time with our clients. They're kind of having these light bulb moments. They're like, yeah, I've heard it from you over the years, or listening to the podcast or whatever the case may be, but now I get it. Like, they can internalize it. And I recently read that for whatever it is that you need to do in life, you should make 2 lists: why it will work and why it won't. And then decide which list you'll carry with you at all times. And the number one reason is why we don't follow through or take action is because we're carrying the wrong list with us. And I think in time, we can prove to ourselves correct that we're going to be unsuccessful or not capable, because we're not taking the chance and adhering to the list. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I was living my life on hard mode because I had a narrative that I just had a slow metabolism, or this is just the way it's always going to be, and there's something wrong with me and I'm broken and blah, 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 blah. And you can see how by me carrying that list created an outcome of self-sabotage and being stuck in that Monday mindset. And it wasn't until I started to develop a different perspective, a different belief, that things started to change for me. And so by missing the mindset, the psychological piece to the puzzle, it was literally like trying to get to California without a roadmap. It just wasn't going to happen. So I would invite our listeners to take action one step at a time, do the things that you know you should be doing, And the reality is nobody is getting in your way except for you. And I believe that everybody is capable of change. We see it. We've seen it in ourselves, Steph, and we've seen it in our clients every single day. None of this is impossible. Many of you just don't have the right roadmap. And that's where the frustration comes in. You're focusing on external things instead of getting really curious about, why do I want to eat right now when I'm not hungry? What emotional experience am I seeking to have from this bag of potato chips? Right? And then we can start to unpack things a bit more. And Steph, you mentioned, I guess what we refer to as the inner critic, but I think that there's value in even trying to see it, that voice as something separate from your own. And we'll have to do a podcast episode on the value of maybe naming your inner critic and just being able to hear it. I think was really mind-blowing for me, because I had never really identified that this was, I could listen to my subconscious brain, right? It was just, I was just moving through life on autopilot until I started to actually hear the things I was saying to myself. I was like, ooh, that's nasty. That's not nice. And so it just becomes more clear on why you're struggling. It's like, listen to yourself. Somebody walked around bullying you all day long. Would that inspire you? Would that motivate you? Would that make you feel good about yourself? Would you become a believer if somebody was telling you all day that you're a loser who can't figure this out? What's wrong with you? So that's it for me today. Any final words from you, Steph, as we wrap it up?
I think that we mostly covered it. I mean, this is a topic we could go on and on and on about and take so many different rabbit holes down, because I mean, that is why you can't learn everything from the podcast. It's what we do in our programs. These are the conversations that we have in Unstuffed, on our calls, in Masterful, with our one-on-one clients, because stuff just comes up and you start to recognize it. And being in a community where everybody's going through similar situations and things like that really helps you see it more clearly. So yeah, I just love what we can put out in the podcast and the information that we're able to share. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty stuff, I mean, this is what we do inside the programs, because it is a lot of work. It is a lot of focusing on these emotional things and learning how to overcome them. It's not just, here's your answer, and then you could put it into practice and take action on it and it's over and done. It doesn't usually work that way. It usually takes some unraveling. And like you said, hearing that inner critic, that in and of itself is a skill and a practice that we need to learn to do, because most people just end up hearing it and being like, that's me. That's just true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I think that this is a big concept, and it's really hard to kind of touch on the things that are going to be valuable and helpful in a podcast episode. But as you indicated earlier, I do hope our listeners continue to listen and hear us talk about it in more practical ways that highlight maybe where this is surfacing for you as you are interacting with food. So bear with us, stick around, and you will continue to stretch your mind and consider new possibilities, hopefully. So that's it for us this week. Big thanks to our listeners for tuning in. We will catch you all next Tuesday. Thanks, y'all.